Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? Let's get started with tonight's story, shall we? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I think for me personally, the very idea of being blind is a real fear, as not being able to see is something that would mortify me. But sometimes even the things we see before our very eyes are not what they may appear. Contrary to what we may believe, our eyes aren't always the greatest witnesses. I learnt this once from a museum of natural science I visited in London once. The people witnessing the same crime scene often gave conflicting reports of what they thought they saw. For the mind can unwittingly become creative and fill in the blanks for us to create a picture in our mind we believe to be the truth, but is anything but. I also have learnt in life that what we're told by the media, or even in our history books, is not actually reliable and cannot be fully trusted. I remember at school being told that Adolf Hitler was shot dead with his wife and killed after the Second World War. The whole world believed this to be the truth, but was it? Were we being lied to? I found it fascinating that one woman came forward who unequivocally claimed she witnessed Hitler living out his life to the fullest with his wife in Argentina, to a grand old age. I remember listening to her account. She was very believable. And you know what? I actually believe her claims are true. I have subsequently learnt you can't trust anything you're told on the media. They always have an agenda. Of course, the media is owned by the elites in corporate business, so it naturally stands to reason. We cannot assume everything we're told is actually the truth. I always try to remember that. I'm telling you this because it's significant to my story. Could I trust what my eyes were seeing, and even my memory? That was the quintessential question. My story begins in England, where I was born and subsequently lived for over 15 years. But I was 14 years of age at the time, when me and my parents moved from our upmarket apartment in London to the Hampshire countryside to settle down to a quiet, more rural way of life. Ostensibly, both my parents had developed a deep hankering to leave behind the hustle and bustle of city life, with the screeching of buses when they slam on their brakes, the rushing motion of the traffic that can sometimes sound like the ocean waves, and of course the hooting of car horns and screaming of people's voices. We had chosen to abandon all that, rather like an old pair of clothes that we no longer wanted to wear, to settle down to a slower pace of living in the countryside. My father's offices were in Fenchurch Street in London, so it would invariably mean he would still continue the long commute, a laborious 2-hour train journey from Hampshire into London every second day. Fortunately, if needs must, he could do some of his work behind a computer in the study, to the rear of our property, that overlooked exquisite views over the backyard, and then a farmer's meadow behind us that was often occupied by a few of their frolicking horses, or on occasions it would be filled with sheep. By all accounts, the cottage was really rather charming, composed of a masterful combination of stonework, red brick and whitewashed brick. It was over 300 years old, and was a Grade 2 listed building, which literally means you can't do any alterations to the house without seeking planning permission first, as of course the house is considered historic. On the day that we moved into our property, we discovered that all the other owners of the cottage had been divorced. We learnt this incredulous oddity from a local villager, an elderly woman that looked like an eccentric character from a Dickens novel, with her clouds of curly white hair that framed her shrunken, wizened, tortoise-like face, and of course she had twinkling brown eyes that seemed so shrewd and astute, the kind of eyes that notice everything and miss nothing. This eccentric, idiosyncratic character was walking along the village green outside our property, with her Jack Russell Terrier Ditzy, who was running by her side, sniffing the grass, wagging his tail, and lifting up his leg over everything. The beguiling village green is a vertical, broad and sizable strip of meticulously mown turf that extends a considerable way out from beyond people's properties, so ostensibly it was much, much larger than your average neighbourhood pavement. It is sporadically dotted with the occasional tall, towering oak tree, and then on the opposite side of the charcoal asphalt road there are other quaint, endearing little cottages running alongside our home, like they would in any regular neighbourhood. My mother is standing there on the village green, thanking the 2 young men for their hard work. She gives them a generous tip. The old woman, clearly a village local, who has lived in this part of the world for a long time, stands still for a moment as she watches the driver of the removal van press down his accelerator and whiz down the long ribbon of asphalt. Me and my mother notice the woman standing there. We can see her slender lips turning down into a frown. She grimaces and turns around to acknowledge both me and my mother, after the van has finally disappeared from our sight and is all but a tiny ant on our field of vision. "Oh, you must be the new residents at Hilltop Cottage. Welcome to Appleshaw." "That's right," said my mother, smiling warmly through her wary eyes at the stranger. "I do hope you'll be sticking around," she says gingerly, "not like all the others," which seemed like a rather peculiar comment to make. My mother raises a quizzical brow. "Sorry," she said, "but what do you mean by that?" For a brief second, the circumspect woman looks cautiously guarded. She shifts uncomfortably in her anorak, and then she says rather reluctantly, "I might as well tell you, as you'll find out soon enough. No one stays at Hilltop Cottage indefinitely. I mean, everybody who moves into the place pretty much gets divorced and sells up, usually before the year is up. It's quite uncanny, really. At first I thought it was a fluke, but it happened over and over again. The cottage has been on the market dozens and dozens of times. The estate agents are very well acquainted with it. As my late mother would say, 2 or 3 times you can pass off as a coincidence, but a couple of dozen times, then you know something is seriously off." "Well, it won't happen to me and my husband," says my mother tenaciously. "Well, we've been married for over 20 years, you know. Our relationship is abidingly steadfast, very strong. That's what the other woman told me, who moved into Hilltop Cottage before you. She'd been married for 35 years, as it happens. 6 months later, I kid you not, she was getting a divorce. You can't make any of this stuff up." At this disquieting, jarring revelation, my mother looks rattled. "You say her relationship was solid, and then she just gets divorced 6 months later, after having been married for 30 years. I hasten to admit that is rather disturbing, but I suppose it's plausible that the relationship was already falling apart long before she moved into the cottage. Perhaps she didn't want to admit as much." "Not at all. I got the distinct impression they were a devoted, very loving couple when they both moved in. But their relationship just fell apart. One day I witnessed all the drama unfolding before my very eyes, would you believe it, when I was taking Ditzy for his morning walk. Let's just say it was prodigiously dramatic. The woman was throwing all her husband's clothes from that window over the hedge onto the green. It was that window over there," she reflects, pointing to the right-hand sash window on the second floor of the cottage. "You should have seen the grass. It was littered with all her husband's clothes. It was incredibly humiliating for the poor man to have all his dirty linen aired so openly to all and sundry. And this being a village, well, gossip gets around faster than British mail or social media around here. Tongues around here tend to wag faster than a dog's tail. I remember thinking it was better than EastEnders or Coronation Street. The woman was screaming at her husband, 'Don't you ever accuse me of cheating again. If I ever see you again, Jack Maddox, I promise you I will wring your neck. I'll be sending the divorce papers to you, and make sure you bloody sign them.' The man was oscillating his arms and saying, 'Don't you worry, my love. With pleasure, I'll sign them the moment they arrive.'" The old woman pauses for a moment. Well, you know, he was calling her some obscene names that I won't care to repeat to you. I've never been comfortable with derogatory, offensive language of any kind. But I've been around a long time. I'm 72 years old, you know. I've seen some things around here, but never in all my born days have I seen a man that looked more irate than Mr. Maddox did that day." The old woman stares at us for a moment with a sombre look in her eyes. "You look like nice people," she says. "I would get out of this place if I were you." She lowers her voice to a faint whisper. "I think it may be something about the cottage, maybe a negative energy in the home which causes people's marriages to become unhinged. It's something about the place. Well, it's not normal, is it?" "You mean the cottage might be haunted," my mother suggests. but it's like the words she spouts sound foreign to her, as if she can't contemplate that this could actually be the case. "Not sure," says the old woman, sounding non-committal. "Oh, excuse me for being so desperately rude. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nellie Parkins. Everyone calls me Nell for short. I live up the road at Bridgefield Cottage, but I doubt we'll be seeing much of each other for very long. Like all the others, you're almost guaranteed to sell up the place after your divorce. Possibly in the next 6 months, I imagine. A year if you're terribly lucky." "Hang on a moment," says my mother defensively. "Please don't talk like that to me, Nell. You sound as if you're expecting me to get a divorce, as if it's a given, just because I'm moving into this cottage. You talk as if the writing is on the wall for my marriage, as if it's written in stone, that all who move to Hilltop Cottage will inescapably get divorced. I'll have you know we haven't even unpacked the boxes in our home, nor have I warmed my slippers under the hearth yet. And you're so absolutely certain I'm going to end up with a broken marriage? Isn't that a bit presumptuous of you, Nell? For your information, 42% of marriages here in Britain end up in divorce, so it isn't against the bounds of impossibility for the people within the 42% statistic to have moved into this cottage and subsequently got divorced. It's not completely implausible, is it?" "Look, I'm not trying to upset you," says Nell. "I can see I've done so, and it really wasn't my intention to dismay or disconcert you whatsoever. And for that I do profusely apologise. I do sometimes ruffle people's feathers the wrong way. I wear my heart on my sleeve, you see. I tell people exactly what I think. It doesn't always go down well with the locals, you know. People don't like your being so brusque, forthright and blatantly candid. Around here they're rather reserved, very polite. So being unequivocally blunt can appear so rude. But that is never my intention. Of course, I've naturally spoken to the estate agents over and over again, telling them to sell Hilltop Cottage to a single person, as I hate seeing marriages go awry like this. But they think I'm talking hocus-pocus stuff and nonsense. And besides, the more time they sell Hill Cottage to a plethora of new enthusiastic buyers, the more commission they make. I just wanted to warn you, that's all, that if I was wearing your shoes, I certainly wouldn't be moving into the cottage, knowing what I know. It's the most judicious advice that I can ever offer you. Not that anyone listens to me. What I say to many is water off a duck's back. I mean, why should they pay attention to an old biddy like myself?" "Well, what do you really know, Mrs. Parkin?" says my mother, becoming all formal and developing a tight, uneasy tone to her voice. "You don't know anything, do you? Not really. You know nothing about the former people that lived in the cottage before us, or why they got divorced. You could completely be barking up the wrong tree." She continues resolutely. "I'll have you know, I shan't be getting divorced any time soon, just because I'm moving into Hilltop Cottage." But beneath her confident facade, my mother's words are actually floundering. I can tell that Nell has hit a raw nerve. "Well, don't come crying to me when it all goes wrong," says Nell sharply. "You can't do wrong for doing right around here, can you? But you can't say I didn't warn you. I know that no one likes to hear the brutal truth, as it's not what you want to hear. But I see it as my duty to warn you about the place. I feel a sense of responsibility, especially with your young one here." She points at me. "Children don't need to be raised in a broken home, do they? Especially if it can be avoided." "Well, thank you, Mrs. Parkins," said my mother brusquely. "You've said your piece. Now, if you don't mind, I've got things to do." My mother turns around, opens our little white gate, closing it behind her, and promptly swaggers back to the cottage, with me following closely behind. "Did you hear that?" my mother says, looking at me through her soulful brown eyes. "The bloody cheek of the woman! She comes barging up to us like some soothsayer, promptly announcing that I'll be divorcing your father soon, because we're moving into Hilltop Cottage. The cheek of it! Have you ever heard something so nonsensical in your entire life? What on earth is the woman smoking?" "It does sound rather weird, Mum, but she was awfully convincing, wasn't she? I mean, everyone who bought this cottage before us got divorced. Don't you think that's more than a little odd? I think the estate agent should have told you about the high turnover of sales in regards to this property." "Well, they didn't say so," said my mother. And as for those previous residents getting divorced, I keep saying divorce isn't that unusual these days, but me and your dad are staunchly solid. We'll never get divorced, never. You believe me, don't you, Flo? Of course I do, Mum. You and Dad are committed. Dad loves the bones off you. You know he does. I cannot see the two of you ever getting divorced. That would be exceedingly unlikely. I can't even envisage the two of you apart. But don't start thinking so negatively. It's not good. Thanks, Flo. That means an awful lot to me, darling, said my mother. She shrugs her narrow shoulders awkwardly, lets out a wary sigh. Oh, I guess I'm just being oversensitive. I mean, this moving lark, it's not for the faint-hearted, is it? And with your father not being on hand to help us move today, it's been even more laboriously chaotic. I feel packing up and moving here from London was possibly the most challenging thing I've ever done. I now know why they say that moving home is one of life's biggest stresses. They're not wrong about that. Look at me. I'm emotionally and physically completely drained. Then a strange woman who calls herself Nell, who lives in the village, out of the blue comes up to me, promptly announcing that my marriage of 20 years is about to come crashing down before me. That's not what I wanted to hear. It's not the sort of thing you randomly pipe to a perfect stranger, is it? It's more than a little unsettling. Oh, just ignore her, Mum. She's a silly old bat who doesn't know what she's talking about anyway. She's possibly the superstitious type who rather fancies herself as a harbinger of doom. You get people like that all the time. I mean, one of the girls in my class at school is always bodefully telling us the world is going to end in any given moment. I promise you, Mum, her parents are preppers. They're preparing for the cataclysmic day the world is supposed to end. And guess what? It never comes. It's pie in the sky, isn't it? You shouldn't allow it to upset you so much, or to get you down. You're too sensitive for your own good, Mum. I mean, what does that woman really know about anything anyway? She's not God, is she? Very good point, Flo, says my mother, a measure of relief washing over her face as my words seem to bring some reassurance. My mother physically stiffens, rather like a starched collar. Very well put, she repeats. She's not God, is she? My mother looks reflective for a moment. But she did seem to speak with a great deal of conviction, don't you think? That doesn't mean anything, Mum. Look at politicians. They always speak with great conviction. And do they ever fulfil their promises, I ask you? Most often they just blow off hot air, just so that we'll vote for them at the next election, so that they can get into a position of power. Then guess what? Their promises never come to fruition. So don't worry yourself, Mum, about something that is unlikely to ever happen. You should have more faith in your marriage. Dad would be grievously upset if he even thought you would even consider it possible that after 20 long years of marriage, your marriage will come crumbling down based on what an old hag has told you. You shouldn't be so gullibly naive. My mother's not listening to me. Her mind appears to be 1,000 miles away, as if she's lost in another world, in a trance-like state. I can see my mother is bustling around our new home, looking a little flustered and on edge. It seems as though Nell's inauspicious words have punched her hard in the guts, which is very unfortunate. There are boxes lying across every available surface put there by the movers, and the sight of all those boxes we have to unpack is more than a little overwhelming, especially for my poor mother, who has assumed the responsibility of unpacking everything herself. But of course I'll give her a helping hand. My mother gets into a flap when she has a bee in her bonnet about something. I can tell that despite my reassurances, Nell Parkin's words have left her unhinged. I watch my mother nervously rifling through the boxes, muttering to herself under her breath. "Oh, this is the one," she says. "It's marked kitchen crockery." My mother unfolds the mugs from the bubble wrap, unpacking them carefully and placing them neatly into the country-style cream kitchen cabinets, with their rather nifty stainless steel door handles. I can see my mother's brown eyes look fatigued, and there are beads of perspiration on her forehead that have caused her makeup to run down her face, and her mascara to become so smudged. I don't tell her that the eye that she has unconsciously smudged by rubbing it with her hands makes her look exactly like a black panda. My mother would be mortified about that. She takes a great deal of pride in her appearance, and is always meticulously turned out in smart designer cotton pants, and elegant T-shirts in the summer, or cashmere jumpers if it's winter, And she always wears her signature accessory, a short string of pearls around her neck, for she is never without them. My mother looks up at me for a moment. Her face wears a fixed stoic expression. Then she pipes gingerly. "Do you think this cottage could be haunted, Flo? I mean, the place is 300 years old after all. It is possible, isn't it?" I look around the rustic cottage with its vintage old-world charm, with rather a bemused expression on my face. I reflect on all the people and characters that probably lived here long before us, over the long course of 300 years. Surely some of their energy would be absorbed in the walls and foundations of this home. It wouldn't be outside the bounds of reasonable possibility for a place like this to carry some kind of psychic impression or footprint, would it? The cottage has low ceilings with vertical wooden beams that sporadically glide across the ceiling in straight lines. The wood is magnificently beautiful, well oiled and very old. The foundations of the house are solid and reliable. I don't believe they make houses this well anymore. It would be frankly too time-consuming and cost far too much. By all accounts, I don't personally sense anything obstreperously untoward going on in this cottage, but then again, we've only just moved in. We haven't even spent our first night here. Some things are far too difficult to detect in the early days, are they not? But then I've never placed much weight on the supernatural before, as I haven't had any experience to credit something so anomalously ambiguous with any real validation, as I have no knowledge about such things, so I'm hardly in an expert position to pass any meaningful commentary. "You fell in love with this cottage, did you not, Mum?" I remind her. "If there was a negative energy here, you would have picked up on it surely when you first saw the cottage. If the place had given off a bodeful impression, you'd have picked up on it straight away, and you wouldn't have been interested in buying this place. Remember the moment you saw this cottage, you said you simply had to have it. You even phoned up the estate agent and demanded that they persuaded the owners to sell you the property, did you not? I've never seen you so resolutely determined about anything before in my life as you were to buy this place. If you were this fired up like that in any business, you would be a multi-millionaire by now, and every single business owner in London would be desirous to hire you on the spot." My mother looks at me alarmed. "That's right, I did, didn't I? I insisted your father bought the cottage for us." She remembers. She continues in thoughtful reflection. "Your father wasn't as enchanted about this place as I was. But then being over 6 foot tall, with low ceilings, I can see why he was less than keen to buy the place. He has to bend his head through every doorway, which must be a teensy-weensy bit annoying for him. I can't say I blame him about that. They were a lot shorter in those olden days, so the doorways were much smaller. I must concede, Flo, you're absolutely right. I've never been this determined about anything in my life than I was to buy this place." "Never?" I asked, surprised. "You mean you've never ever wanted anything in your life more than you wanted this cottage?" "Never," she insists, "but I'm only talking about material things in this regard, not about people. I've never felt such a desperate urge to own something before, almost as if this cottage itself was calling my name, as if it had chosen me, not the other way round, if you know what I mean." I laugh. My mother's imagination is in overdrive. She's clearly deeply troubled about Mrs. Parkin's ominous words. They're banging away incessantly at her mind, like a woodpecker's beak hammering away relentlessly against a large tree trunk. I make a mental note to have words with my father about this peculiar conundrum. My dad's currently still in Germany, doing a business deal with clients, but he'll be back next week. My dad is so practical and pragmatic. He's always had a way of grounding my mother and bringing her back down to earth, when sometimes her flighty imagination can whisk her up in the clouds. My parents are so good for each other. My mother was absolutely right about that. I couldn't imagine them getting divorced. My mother is like pepper to my father's salt. She's spicy, delicate, ethereal, creative, and sometimes quite whimsically naive, while my father is like salt, flavoursome, solid, reliable, and very grounded. They're a great team. They complement each other favourably, and more to the point, we're a secure, wholesome, happy family. Surely nothing could ever drive us apart, despite the prophetic words of a wizened old villager hanging over our lives like a bad smell. But that's all they are, empty words, nothing more, nothing less. My mother continued to unpack some of the large cardboard boxes in the cottage. I decided to take a walk around the cottage, armed with this new thought that it might potentially be haunted. The very notion seemed almost silly to me. Even so, I decided to examine every room on the property to see if I can sense any unusual vibrations, although I wasn't exactly sure what to look for, as I have no comprehension about such matters. As how do you search for something you cannot physically see? It's a little like chasing the clouds or running after a rainbow. Needless to say, I'm not exactly the most intuitive individual, but I wanted to get a sense of this unorthodox property that my mother had so impulsively purchased, especially after Nell's idiosyncratic comments. I walked to the front of the cottage and could see at once why my mother had fallen in love with this prepossessing place. In truth, I hadn't fully appreciated the quaint loveliness and indelible charm of this enchanting, sumptuous location. A fabulous congenial village, upon which the friendly villagers were on first-name terms with each other. Furthermore, this charming, arresting cottage was rarely quirky, with contrasting stone, red brick and whitewashed walls, very large sash windows, and a bright purple front door, along with purple lobelia and pink roses that rambled rambunctiously over the front wall of the cottage. I went through every single room of this house, every single nook and cranny, and I can honestly say I felt nothing disingenuous that would have led me to believe that this house harboured any unsavoury energy. Either that, or I was completely thick-skinned and insensitive to anything outer-worldly in our home. It was a month after me and my family had moved into Treetop Cottage that we began to physically relax and to settle down happily in our new abode. It was an old property, so yes, it did sometimes groan at night, rather like an old woman with rickety bones. And the staircase would sometimes creak. But then again, that's to be expected with an old property, is it not? My father had assured my mother that Mrs. Nellie Parkin was possibly as nutty as a fruitcake, so therefore she shouldn't pay any attention to her. "You rarely believe we could get divorced," he said, kissing my mother affectionately on the lips. "You are a silly minx, aren't you? You know that would never happen to us." I'm glad to say we were warmly welcomed to the village, and some of the locals in our village told us not to take any notice of Nellie Parkin. "She means well," our next-door neighbour told us, "but I'm sure she doesn't know what she's talking about." "So you're saying she's wrong about the strange sequence of divorces that happened here at Hilltop Cottage?" my mother asked pointedly. Our neighbour blushed a pink colour. "I'm not saying that exactly. Well, yes, all the couples I know of that moved into the cottage did get divorced, but big deal. It happens, does it not? It has absolutely nothing to do with the house, I'm sure." Even our neighbour's voice physically wavers, as if she too is doubtful and rather cynical about the reassurances she generously offers us, which is faint comfort. Does she secretly suspect that the house is jinxed, haunted or cursed, I wonder? And if she does, she's certainly keeping her lips tightly shut. But I'm not buying her silence. Isn't it funny that in life, the very moment when you breathe that quintessential sigh of relief, and you say to yourself, "I worried about absolutely nothing. This is just an old cottage with a plethora of character, and of course it's not haunted, nor will it bring about a devastating divorce," then all hell breaks loose just when you begin to relax. It always happens when you get comfortable. I remember returning home from the local school one day that dropped me at the bus stop on the village green. I walked to our cottage, which was only yards away, overwhelmed by the pungent scent of cigar smoke when I opened the front door. "Who visited the cottage today?" I asked my mother curiously. My mother looks perplexed. "We didn't have any guests visiting us today, darling. Why do you ask?" "The house smells as if someone's been smoking aromatic cigars. It's very potent. Surely you can smell it." "Really?" said my mother, sniffing the air. "I don't smell anything at all." When my father returned home, he also commented about the cigar smoke and said, "Who came to visit you today, darling?" My mother said, "No one, not you as well. Flo also thought we had a visitor." "It's very curious," said my father. "The house reeks of cigar smoke." He walked into the downstairs library. There was a tumbler sitting on the side table beside the velvety red and gold upholstered chair, and there were a couple of drops of whisky left at the bottom of the tumbler. My father lifted the glass to his nose and took a sniff. "Whisky? Esther, what's going on here?" he said. "You must have had a visitor."
Why are you lying to me? Or shall we say, being rather creative with the truth? We always talk straight to each other, do we not? So who came to visit us today? You must have given them a whiskey. It wasn't an old boyfriend, was it?
My mother's face coloured, and for a brief second I also thought she was hiding something, as she looked like someone who'd been caught with their knickers down, or like a dog who'd eaten your foam mattress and gives you a rather sheepish look as he covers his eyes with his paw, looking as guilty as hell, but acts nonchalant, as if he never did anything.
No one, Simon, my mother assures him.
I have no idea where that tumbler came from, or the strange smell of cigar smoke. She looks worried for a moment. You don't think someone broke into the cottage, do you? She asks, looking concerned.
What? Ha ha, laughs my father. Esther, he says incredulously, don't be so ridiculous. Someone breaking into our cottage to sit on our red and gold upholstered chair in order to drink a tumbler of whiskey and enjoy a cigar. Isn't that far-fetched, even for you? No one breaks into someone's house for that erroneous reason. If you break in, you steal something. Not come and enjoy a spot of whiskey in somebody's home. You could do that in a bar or anywhere else for that matter.
It was around this time that my father every night without fail was hounded by the same strange dream, rather like a silent movie. At first he would see a fuzzy television screen in his mind, like when it goes on the blink and you see black and white static dots, and you hear that whooshing sound. Then in his dream the screen flashes for a moment, growing very still. Then he sees the shadowy silhouette moving towards him, wearing a top hat and tails, moving stealthily into his field of vision, so he can see the man very clearly. He doesn't recognise the man at all. The man's face develops into a large grin. He lets out a discomposing laugh, wagging his finger at my dad.
Esther's cheating on you. She's cheating on you.
He points towards the upholstered couch in the downstairs library. My father does not see the man who's sitting on the couch, for he can only see the arm reaching out for the tumbler of whiskey, and the clouds of smoke being puffed from a pipe, not a cigar as it happens. When my father told my mother about the strange dream, my mother laughs at him.
Don't tell me you believe that nonsense.
It was possibly your unconscious mind believing the tumbler we found, with the whiskey in it, and the strange smoke we smelt, is my anomalous lover, but I assure you I'm not having an affair.
Oh, honestly, darling, you should know me better than that, says my mother, poking him affectionately in the chest.
But for the first time in my life, I can see doubt registering in my father's eyes. Why, I do believe he thinks my mother is actually lying to him. It's then I realise in horror he's beginning to believe my mother is actually having an affair. Surely he knows her better than that. But judging by the clenching of his jawline and the stiffening of his chest, he's not amused. It's as if what he's seen in his dreams has somehow morphed into his reality, and that he can't distinguish fact from fiction. And within a matter of weeks he emphatically begins to believe my mother is actually having an affair. It didn't help that the house continually smelt of aromatic smoke, and there would be tumblers found everywhere with residues of whiskey. In incredulous places, like under the bed, in the closet, in an underwear drawer, in the freezer. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that my mother was not cheating on my dad, but my father wasn't buying any of it. I could see my father becoming angrier and more enraged. It was rather like his personality visibly changed. My father became the most unreasonable, cantankerous, disagreeable, crotchety man that I've ever seen. He would blow up into a temper every single night and get so belligerent that he would begin to throw things against the wall in an incandescent rage, breaking crockery, vases and china, and he simply could not be tamed.
I know you're having an affair, he would scream. Why the F do you keep lying to me, Esther? I'm not stupid. I know what's going on here. I can tell you're cheating on me.
Even when I reassured him that I knew Mother was definitely not cheating on him, he failed to listen to me. But there were repetitive suggestions of my mother's supposed infidelity, always left around the house, like silent messengers, things we could not explain, like a single rose on her bedside table,
A bed that had been made, now completely ruffled up, as if two people had been lying in there, with the faint smell of a man's aftershave on the sheets. Then a man's bright red sock was found lying ominously under the bed. And the most suggestive item of all was a man's pair of underpants that almost certainly did not belong to my father. All I can say is that it was as if my mother was being set up so that my father would conclude that she was cheating on him. "Darling," my mother would say, "I would never have an affair on you. You know that I would never do that to you." My father growls like a disgruntled dog. Sometimes his voice seems to change. Even his eyes visibly darken. He would say to her, "Why are you lying to me, Esther? I'm not an idiot, you know. Who is he? I want to know who he is." It was strange to see my father so pugnacious. So let me leave you with that exciting cliffhanger, because we finish the story tomorrow night, and it gets very exciting because not only does she leave England to go to America, but she has a very exciting Bigfoot encounter. But before we go there, I would like to say to you that to honour Bully's memory and to make the algorithms go ballistic, it would be lovely if you'd leave a comment. So you get a lot, when you get a lot of feedback, then you get a lot more exposure. So I'd really appreciate your comments. Until next time, goodbye and good night.